Right, there we are. So hopefully you can all see that. So this, I'm going to talk particularly about church money this evening and how we can use our money as Christians and as churches to honour and protect God's creation. So first of all, I wanted to talk a little bit about who we are as Operation Noah, which is a bit of a unusual name, and it's actually nothing to do with the seas or boats or shipping or anything that you might expect from the story of Noah. But we are a Christian charity that works with the church to inspire action on the climate crisis. So we try and provide leadership and focus and inspiration in response to the growing threat that we all face of catastrophic climate change. And we're primarily a campaigning organisation, but we also produce educational materials, some worship and liturgy type materials for churches to use on environmental themes as well. And we were set up 20 years ago by Green Christian and Churches Together in Britain and Ireland. And at the time, there weren't many Christian organisations working on climate change, and it wasn't really a focus for churches. If anything, it was a peripheral issue. It wasn't mainstream at all. So we were set up to kind of push it up the agenda and really make the theological case for the need as Christians to work around creation care. But of course, in 20 years, things have moved on hugely. And now it is, thankfully, a mainstream issue for many people and something that we see a lot more charities and other organisations getting involved in supporting churches in this area, which is wonderful. And I think before we, as we kicked off 20 years ago, we started off really trying to get churches to take political action. So getting churches to lobby their MPs and be involved in the policy process and try and change government activity. And then we came to a point of realizing that actually we need to get our own house in order before we start trying to push others. So a lot of our campaigning has been focusing on churches themselves, trying to get churches to stop investing in fossil fuels, to think more about building resources around climate solutions and using church land as well to bring about biodiversity and nature and that sort of thing. So we've been focusing internally, in a sense, ecumenically across all churches in the UK and Ireland. But then in recent years, we have again started to turn our focus outward and get more involved in mainstream, wider climate campaigning. So try to bring a sort of Christian voice to those. Let's move to the next slide. So who are we in terms of people? So we have 4 staff members, myself and 3 colleagues, as well as a couple of people who help us out with administration and communications and things like that as well. So we're the biggest team we've ever been in 20 years, which is great. So we're growing. I think for about 19 of those 20 years, we were one person. So it's great to have a bit of a wider team building this work. And as I said, we are primarily campaigning organisations. So we have 3 main campaign areas, and one is around church investment in climate solutions. So there's a wonderful picture here of solar panels on the cathedral, and we've been talking a bit about solar panels this evening and churches putting their money into that sort of thing. And I'll talk more about that later. The other area is around church land and the climate crisis. So that's thinking about everything from churchyards and working with Caring for God's Acre, all the way through to diocesan glebe land, up to church commissioners with the huge land holdings that they have, encouraging use of that land for environmental benefits, so increasing biodiversity, restoring habitats for nature, as well as things like carbon sequestration, so planting trees and re-wetting peatland for some dioceses that have peatland in their patches, or using it for renewable energy, using the land for solar or wind projects. So there's we've got reports and resources and activities on church land use as well. And then thirdly, divestment. And that's probably the thing that Operation Noah is most known for, because for the last decade, we've been banging on everybody's door trying to get churches to divest. And actually, it's been a really successful campaign. In the last decade, we've seen almost all church denominations across the UK move their money out of fossil fuels, which has been brilliant. And the reason I got involved with Operation Noah initially when I was in Bristol Diocese was I was in 2019, I think it was, working with Operation Noah to get Bristol Diocese to divest. And at the same time, we declared a climate emergency, we got a net zero strategy, and it all came together. So divestment has had a fantastic catalyst effect in firstly moving church money out of fossil fuels, which you don't want to be funding, but also really building momentum within churches to have more of a focus on environmental issues. So that's been a really successful campaign that we've kind of finished now because most most churches have done it, which is wonderful. But still, at a local level, if you find that your church is still holding investments and those investments are in fossil fuels, which isn't hugely likely because if you are likely to have money held, it's often with funds like CCLA who have divested as well. But if that is an issue for you and you'd like to talk more about it, then please drop me a line and I'd be really happy to talk about that with you. But as I said, this evening is more focusing on how we care for God's creation through our finances in particular. And I wanted to talk firstly about our support for Christians and churches to switch your bank accounts. So in 2023, as it says on the screen, the big five UK high street banks, so that's Barclays, HSBC, Santander, NatWest, and Lloyds, provided $55 billion to fossil fuel companies, which, as we know, is helping to drive the climate crisis. So that's a huge amount of money that's invested in the extraction of fossil fuels. And so we need to get the big mainstream banks to stop funding the fossil fuels. And one way of doing that is writing to them and asking them to move out of fossil fuels. But another way is to withdraw our business and to switch our bank accounts as Christians to green, clean, fair banking. And I have a image on the screen there for the Greener, Fairer Banking Guide, which is from the Just Money movement. And they have a brilliant guide that's just not long ago been updated, all around choosing an ethical bank account for your church and individually as well. And as consumers, we have the power to choose where we put our money. And there are increasingly a number of green choices we can make when it comes to our banking and our savings. And just this last month, I'm with the Co-op Bank and I had an email saying we've merged with Coventry Building Society. And now we're able to offer a greater range of charity banking. So where there maybe weren't possibilities even a couple of months ago for churches to find high street banks that are green to hold accounts with, those are opening up. So that's one of our main campaigns to churches and individuals. So as I mentioned, we have this Big Bank Switch, and you can click through onto the Big Bank Switch website, and it guides you through the process to find a green bank and to switch to them. And it's relatively easy, particularly as an individual. They have this switch guarantee where you fill out a form and all your direct debits and all your standing orders get moved across for you. And often banks will give you a little welcome, £150, £200 to say, please move to us. So it's a win-win. As I say, for churches, it's been slightly more complicated by needing to have a local bank that you can actually go and cash into. And so some churches have been a bit slower to switch their bank accounts for that reason. And also, if you have lots and lots of standing orders all coming to you that they would need to change, that's a barrier as well. But probably a good thing to do to signal to your congregations that you're taking the environmental crisis seriously and doing something really practical about it as a church. And it helps towards eco-church as well. So it's a section of the eco-church finance and lifestyle section. And as well as bank accounts, some churches and all dioceses hold other investments. And that's another way in which we can really signal a move towards greater environmental action. Because we know that finance is going to play a huge role enabling the world to transition to net zero. And we are well short globally and in this country of the investment that's needed, and time is quickly running out. So while much of the money that is needed is going to come from public finances around the world, so governments, there is a huge need for private investors to demonstrate their commitment to a greener economy as well. And churches and Christian institutions, so religious orders and Christian charities, really hold significant influencing power as well as financial power. So by taking action on this and speaking out, churches can really shift society because they have that moral voice. So we're calling on the church to take a lead with this. And just as many denominations, as I said, have divested from fossil fuels, now the church can take action to invest in climate solutions and to influence others to do the same. And I was really struck by this top figure on the slide here that Christian aligned assets, so money in church bank accounts and investments, are over $260 billion worldwide, which is huge, isn't it? I was really struck by that figure. And I was looking into the details of that, thinking, well, where's the UK in that? Because that seems like a very huge figure, and I don't quite know how much the UK church accounts for. But although the US comes out like heads and shoulders above everybody else, I think that they have 8 times more investments than the second largest country churches. The UK is still 5th on that list. So due to the historical wealth of our church denominations and our religious orders, we still are pretty up there in that global sum. And I mean, the Church of England alone has an estimated endowment of like 13.6 billion, I think it is. So we're not talking small fry here. We're talking big sums of money that that can be moved into adapting to and mitigating climate change. And I put a couple of other figures on the screen. So it'll cost the UK 10 billion a year just to adapt to climate change. And to meet its net zero targets, it's estimated that the UK needs an additional 60 billion a year. So there's really big sums that are needed to address this issue just in the UK alone. So there's much need for the churches to step in and take action on this. So last year, we launched this new initiative called the Green Investment Declaration, which is developed jointly with the Just Money movement as well. And this is designed as a tool to help churches to do just that, to take practical steps to make sure that their investments line up with their faith values, that they reflect their environmental concerns, and ultimately use their money to have real impact in helping to build a better world. And the great news is that Diocese of Truro is a leader in this. Hooray! You've been one of our first signatories to this declaration, and this is your announcement that you put on your website back in May last year as a diocese, which is wonderful. And there's a number of different dioceses and other denominations who have coming alongside as well. The Quakers have become signatories, the Methodist Church, and the Diocese of Blackburn, I think, is the other C of E diocese that's gone through the motions as well to make this happen. So it's really brilliant to know that you're taking a lead in this area. But churches across all levels, so individual parish churches, as long as you have some money in an investment account, can also become a signatory to this and take public action. Oh, how do I get to the next slide again? Oh, there we go. Oh, it's gone through about 5 now. There we go. That's the one I was wanting to show you. So the initiative is set up to have 3 levels, and it's designed to be quite low bar in a sense. So you don't need to have actually started investing in climate solutions at all yet to come alongside us and join up and speak out about it. You can come in at an acorn level and say, we want to make our investments grow in this. We want to start putting our money into solar or whatever it might be in the next 2 or 3 years. But we'd like to sign up and be part of this community, which is great, all the way through to oak level, which Truro Diocese is. You're an oak level signatory to the declaration, and you've already invested, I think, 7%. Mike, you probably know better than me. Is that 7% of your assets in? Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry. Interestingly, in our meeting today, we found out that actually the investment committee has sold a lot of the renewables because they were performing very well, and
Oh,
they've reinvested in what do we call ethical funds. So, but I suspect we will probably be down towards we were up to nearly 10%. I expect we're now probably down towards about the 6. But I did remind them today that we've signed up to this, and they need to make sure that, well, yes, they can look at where we invest our money, but it's not just financial performance that we're interested in.
absolutely. Well, thank you, Mike. And I think that's a really interesting case in point, isn't it? That actually having signed up to this, it does kind of hold investment committees' feet to the fire a bit to say, this is something that we've committed to. Because I think in so often environmental conversations are had over here, and then financial conversations are had over here, and the twain don't meet. So actually having something that really links those two within church conversations is.
Well, we were talking today about the role of our environment board and saying, look, it really is there to actually hold people to account, interrogate and hold to account. And I think this is a classic example of where, they will have made a decision. And I stepped down as the chair of the Board of Finance in September, so I'm not on the investment committee anymore. And so as soon as I leave, they sell them because they didn't actually. I'm guessing they didn't think through what's the knock-on impact of this. Whereas if I'd been there, I'd have said, but yeah. So it's not so much. I don't have a problem with them selling. You just need to make sure that we've reinvested in the right place.
And take a sort of longer term view as well, because often,
Yeah.
It takes a while for some of these returns to really stabilize and grow.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah, we won't
yeah.
get into long debates about the financing of renewable projects.
So yes, so the encouragement really that if you're in a larger church that does have some reserves and they're squirreled away, this is something that you can bring to your PCC, have a conversation about, and ensure that they are invested in the sorts of things that we want to see. And I think that was pretty much everything I wanted to show you. This is the declaration text, so you know what it's all about. It's saying that as a faith organisation, we have the moral obligation to be advocates for climate, nature, and humanity, which are all impacted by the climate crisis. We believe that our actions must help build a society that's just for all. We therefore believe it's our responsibility to align our investments with our faith values, move beyond negative screening, and consider how our investments actively fund climate solutions to create positive social and environmental impacts. So by signing this declaration, we acknowledge the importance of being on an investment journey to build a more just world for both people and the planet. So it doesn't sign you up to particular percentages or amounts of money. It's more of a mission statement, recognizing the importance of church finances in building a better world and really crucially speaking up about it. So there's packs of materials that we've provided to support churches to do this. There are press releases, motions to take it up to deanery and diocesan synods. There are short films. There are flyers, leaflets, all sorts of different promotional things that kind of help you to make a bit of a splash about this and talk about it in the wider community. So Ben was telling me that normally in these sessions you have a bit of breakout time and have a conversation about what you've heard and a time for discussion. With this size of a group, I'm not quite sure whether you want to keep it all in one or whether we want to split into a couple of groups. But I put a few questions that I thought we could consider. And if you don't know the answer to them now, perhaps take away and take to the next PCC meeting or the next eco committee meeting or wherever you have influence in your church. And if you have any questions for me as well, I'd be very open to talking more.
Fabulous, Claire. Thank you. I think let's look at let's take a few minutes just to look at these questions together as a group, actually, because they're good questions. So yeah, I guess that first question there is relatively personal because it's important. But just what are people's thoughts about how, as people of faith and connected in our churches, what are people's thoughts about how we use the gift of the finance that we have? How do we use those for the better good? Anybody want to offer a view?
I'm happy to kick off. So mostly, correct me if I'm wrong, Claire, that when we were looking at particularly the Green Investment Guide or Declaration, we're looking purely at the investments, but we've had quite a few of our churches talk today about paying to install solar panels and air source heat pumps and secondary double glazing, which is not an investment in the traditional sense that it's with a fund manager, but instead it's we are investing in the future. So our church put solar panels on in 2012, and that's generating income, but also it's helping to cut some of our carbon, which is huge in our church because it's a big church which used a lot. I think you're still looking for the Green Investment Declaration is pure investments, aren't you? Money in funds.
Well, yes, at the moment, yes, only because when we started to think about some of the other things that could be counted as green investments, it becomes a bit complicated about where you draw the line. Because if it's about replacing windows that are otherwise broken and would need to be replaced anyway, are you making that as a green investment, or is that just maintenance? And there are arguments for both, aren't there? And in a sense, I think you have to be a bit pragmatic and say, well, churches are making financial and environmental decisions alongside each other, and the spirit of this is to encourage the environmental conversations to be brought to the fore. And if, as a result of having these conversations, you do make environmental investments that are things like solar panels, then wonderful, and that's a really good outcome. But what this is particularly focusing on is finance being moved, because that can be more easily measured, and so we can sort of collate it and say, oh, churches have moved this amount of money because they've told us they have, whereas it's a bit harder when you say that churches have replaced their windows. But it's all good stuff, and it's all should be encouraged.
I put a point in the chat because in the past it's oh, should we move to the co-op bank or whatever, and I just said I need somewhere where we can take the weekly bankings. Well, in Liscard they've all gone, so HSBC, Lloyds, Barclays and NatWest have all closed, and Santander is still there, but they don't really do charity stuff for a church of our size. And we bank in the post office, still with HSBC. And so actually, really just listening to you tonight, I was thinking, well, we have a CAF account, which we use for a debit card. We could switch to co-op because we don't have a co-op bank, but we have a co-op in the area, and they're probably linked in with the post office, I'm guessing. For cash, there's nothing. The only thing that was stopping us is the standing orders we get coming in. Well, I've moved most of the people across to PGS. So I've only got about a dozen standing orders, and I know the people, and I could go and take the forms and say, can you refill in these forms and manage that? So actually, there's things that I always thought was a barrier. It just made me think maybe I need to look at this again.
Yes,
do you recommend writing to the likes of HSBC and saying, what are you doing about this? And then when you get a response back saying diddly squat, you say, well, in that case, I'm moving. Rather than just moving.
Yes, and sometimes you can cut out that first stage. Some people are there's through the Big Bank Switch website, you pledge to switch and you tell your bank why you're switching. So you're saying, I'm leaving you because because of your.
That would help. Because I think if we just switch, most of our churches are peanuts to an HSBC of this, and so unless there's a mechanism of saying why we're doing it.
Yeah.
I think it's
And putting it in the local paper. So, you know, we're switching our bank account for ethical and environmental reasons because it's good PR for the church and it's bad PR for the fossil
Yeah.
funding banks.
Yeah, it's a good one.
We also, I mean, I guess we also had. I'm flipping between two screens so I can look at the questions. But this, what do people feel about what's already happened? The question was, does your bank fund fossil fuels? But what is there generally within our group here? I would hope there is, but is there generally an understanding that anything we can do to move away from fossil fuels, or the funding of fossil fuels, is a good and an appropriate thing for us to do as a community of faith? Is that do we all kind of hold to that, or, you know, are we in the land of drill, baby, drill? Unless you're a dentist, of course, in which case that may have a whole other meaning.
It's really difficult, actually, because one of our church wardens is an oil man, and still works in the oil industry. And his total stance is that we will always need oil. We can't do without oil at all. Now, that might be the current case, but in the future, there is so much science going on that, you know, I'm sure we'll be able to produce something synthetically eventually that doesn't have the impact that fossil fuel does. But it's quite hard to convince them at the moment that this is something that we should do. It is quite a battle, and it's a battle. I think I have to pick my battles, I'm afraid. And at the moment, what bank we use is not on the highest priority, I have to admit. But it's always in the back of my mind. And you know, it is something that we already do use the CCLI. Is it CCLI? Yeah.
CCLA.
Yeah, CCLA. Sorry. Yeah, that we've used those for long-term savings. So we're part of the way there, just not all of the way there.
And I think that it's one thing that comes up in the Eco Church survey under lifestyle is encouraging individuals within the church and members of the congregation to consider the ethics of their finances as well. So, I mean, even if the church isn't in a position to switch right now, it can be something that you put in the newsletter, and actually it helps to keep it on the agenda for people and give them different things that they can do, because often people want to do something but that you know, they feel like, well, I do the recycling, and you know you know, some of the smaller things, and actually keeping on suggesting things like this can be quite a helpful way of keeping the conversation going.
Yeah,
I mean, I know that in our church we do that. We sort of once a year we put something in the newsletter about switching bank accounts and the big bank switch, because it just kind of helps drip.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we'll make sure we include that in the newsletter this time around as well. I was going to say it's also right at the core of creationcare.org. So you'll remember that we had Annabelle South come and speak to us about this kind of eco home effect. We said creationcare.org is like an eco church for your personal life, your home, your family, your way of being. And again, how we handle our finances is very clearly marked in there. Are there any general questions for Clare? Because I'm just aware that time is, again, we're just heading towards landing, but just wonder if there were any questions for Clare about the work that's been done, or any sort of future observations. Shelley, hi, and then Sarah.
I'm sure I knew about Operation Noah from worship resources. Are they still available? Are they being updated all the time?
Yes, yeah, thank you. So we do, and actually, I think on my next slide, this is our latest Lent course. But we haven't called it a Lent course because you can use it at any time, and our church is doing it in Creation Tide, but it's being produced ready for Lent, and it's called Where Your Treasure Is, and it's a Bible study and discussion course around how you can explore how your money can help tackle climate change. So that's thinking through kind of Christian stewardship and some of what we've talked about tonight about banking and investments and thinking about pensions and all sorts of things, but through a biblical lens and a Bible study. So that's our latest, but yes, we do also have around the Green Investment Declaration, we've produced some service plans and liturgy for a service you could do on this topic around where your treasure is, and prayers and small group resources and things like that as well. So yes, I mean that's still all. I can send you over the link to on the website. You can download all of that, and it's all freely available. We're also running this Where Your Treasure Is. If you don't yet have a Lent group or you're very keen and want to do more, Operation Noah team are going to be running them on Wednesday lunchtimes through Lent from 1 till 2. And we're putting an open invitation for anybody around the country who wants to join us and bring their sandwiches on a Wednesday lunchtime. We'll just be running through this, even if it's just the staff team, and sharing that together. So the invitation's there if you'd like to join us for one or more of those lunchtime sessions as well.
Is there a piece of info or link to that we can share in our newsletter?
Yes, I can share that as well.
Fabulous.
I'll share the presentation and the Lent course link.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity to be able to tuck into that on a Wednesday lunchtime. Sarah, did you have a question?
Well, it's not so much more of a question, but I mean, I used to work for a subsidiary of BP in the 80s, and they then were at the forefront of moving away from oil and working out how we can be environmentally friendly. So I think we tend to think of all the oil companies being such bad boys because they're giving us fossil fuels to throw in our aeroplanes and our cars and our heating. But if you look around our world, that is only part of what we use oil for. We use oil for everything else. If we want to build a new road, we need tarmac. Guess where that comes from? Oil.
Yeah.
If we want plastic water pipes, so we don't have lead ones anymore, it's all oil. So I think sometimes we need to change our messaging. But one of the things I read the other day is looking at what you buy for your clothes. Because if they're made from synthetic materials, it's all come from oil. You need to be working to virtually every fleece there is made from oil. And it won't rot away in landfill or rot away at all. It's not that sort of stuff. So, but buying things made of cotton and silk and wool are far much better for our environment. And maybe more people could do little things like that. I mean, certainly in my deanery, I think only 2 churches have got any money to put in investments at all. And they've got very, very little in their bank accounts, and they're struggling to pay the MMF. So we're not a wealthy area, but I think we can do other things. I mean, just make a list when you look around your house of what's made with plastic. Could you buy an alternative that isn't plastic? But it's lots of little things that we could do. I mean, certainly now in our big Tesco's, we can recycle all the single-use plastics, and I'm just staggered at how much there is. And if everybody did that, we could reuse the plastics, so that would be better. But life is complicated, isn't it? And everything has a consequence. But if you want banks, you need to come to Launceston, because at the moment we've got 5, and we're just about to lose 2, but we still have 3 left.
There you go. And I think Bude are about to get one of these bank hubs where on any given day of the week.
Yeah, we'd love to have a hub, I think.
I think that's where we're heading.
Yeah.
Duncan, I knew Duncan was next, and then Mike.
Thanks. I just wondered, Claire, whether you mentioned church commissioners earlier on in your talk, and Ben knows this of me, but I do get asked when I'm in some of the secular groups locally talking about things to do with the climate. I have been asked before now about the fact that the church commissioners own this enormous quantity of national land, but it's very difficult to get stats or information about it. Is there any chance of picking your brains sometimes, or you pointing me in the right direction so I know how to answer sometimes?
Yeah, good question, because I think it is like the 10th biggest landowner in the UK. It's huge. And there's a charity called Wildcard that have a campaign.
They have. I've been involved a little bit with that, but that's a campaign. But it's finding out if you want an ongoing trend on what they're up to. It's very difficult to get info out of them, isn't it?
It is. I mean, one thing that we do as Operation Noah is we ask questions repeatedly at General Synods of them of how much land they have and where it is and how they're going to make maps available and blah, blah, blah. So we nag in that sense.
Right.
But it's still not available on their website. So we've got this church land campaign vision document and it has all these 2025 targets that we've sent to the church commissioners, and it includes them making their land ownership public by the end of this year. So whether or not they will, but it's still they know what they've fully mapped it and they know what land classifications they have, but it's not yet publicly available.
Just this week there has been I'm trying to think, it must have been in one of the DEO network emails, but Paul Jaff, who is the head of land management for the church commissioners, because we pushed him as the Diocesan Environment Officers Network when we met last year. We said, we get asked this a lot, what are we doing with our land? How can we demonstrate what we're doing? So there's 3, I mean, they're glossies. 3 films have just been made about land management, environmental land management, partnerships with farming, and something else. So I'll make sure we include a link to those in the newsletter this time around.
Thanks.
But I am 24th and 25th of March. We have the next Connect 25, which is the Net Zero and Diocesan Environment Officers Conference up at the Antarctic Survey in Cambridge. And I know it will be a feature of that, pushing harder again to say, what are we doing with our land? And how can we make sure it's working better? So, and to be more open with it. It is the next great piece that we need to open up and have a greater transparency on.
Thank you.
I've got a mic and then I've got a Shelley.
Hi, I'm actually just picking up quickly on Sarah's point. For if I can remember my O-level or A-level chemistry, whichever it was, if you want to clean up your act, you're going to need soap, and that comes from oil as well. So it's just staggering the stuff that is made out of soap. Picking up on that, church commissioners, I had that very conversation at a bus stop waiting for the park and ride bus back with a guy about the church commissioners and the money that they held. I was at an Operation Noah conference in London and was on with Paul Jaff from Head of Sustainability for Church Commissioners. So if you have a look on Operation Noah and resources and webinars and videos, it's recorded there as film 3, Church Investors in Climate Solutions. So I mean that will give you some information about what they're doing and how they're actually using their land. But yes, it would be useful if we had more clarity and more openness, if you like, about who's holding what.
Yeah, I think it is coming. I know there is a fairly significant bit of juggling going on in the background to work out how it's done well, but I believe it is en route. Shelley had a hand up.
It was just a comment, really, that Andrew Yates told me that there had been a big project being launched or in the future about the greening of glebe-land. So all the glebe-land that the church own, that they were going to encourage a lot of greening of it, and rewilding, which, I mean, that's what we're doing in our parish, but he was saying it was going to be launched nationally. Do you know anything about that, Ben?
I do. So we are running a pilot project for the National Church at the moment in partnership with Exeter Diocese about there's already been sort of a national land mapping exercise, but not at a cursory level, but not quite deep enough. And so we've just done the tender process, and we're now putting that out, seeking partners to come and map our land quite specifically for biodiversity, net gain, soil quality, management and oversight, and all that stuff. And as a diocese, we are keen and seeking to, wherever we can, either with land that we presently have or by buying land that enables it, we're seeking to partner for biodiversity net gain with leaders in this field. So it wouldn't necessarily be us who leads on it, because if Climate Coalition or Natural Cornwall or Cornwall Wildlife Trust, or, you know, we want to work with the partners who really know their stuff in this place, but we are keen and purposefully seeking out land that we can do that with as a diocese. It's right in there.
If I can come in
Right,
on that, Ben,
okay.
as well, we when I was on the Glebe committee, every piece of land that we own is mapped, and we've got the potentials of this might be open development in umpteen years or affordable houses, and in that we've mapped the whole of our Glebe land against the grid to see where there's potential for renewables. We've put it up on for biodiversity net gain, so that people know that it's available if they want to get this plus 10% if we're building houses. We've looked at environmental projects, and when we're actually considering renting a piece of land or bringing a tenant in, we actually look at the environmental credentials of the potential tenants, and, you know, and potentially favour.
Probably favoured us then, because our bid was purely about rewilding.
Yeah,
it's
not the only criteria, but it's certainly a big tick.
Yeah. We like any other charitable organisation have to demonstrate best use and best asset management of our assets. So it's always, you know, we always are looking to what can we do that will encourage a reflourishing of God's creation.
Yeah, I mean, we have no problem with paying our rent. We're quite happy to fundraise that. What we have come across this year is that we're up for the renewal of the lease, because it's only every 3 years, and we've been told we've got to pay another £600 this year on top of our rent to renew the lease. And actually, that's not going to be very encouraging to rewilding groups, because actually what we have to do is go out and fundraise for that money. So you know, if in the future, I mean, we're obviously going to have to do it, but in the future, I think that's got to be put into the equation. That's going to put off groups from actually managing that land if they've got to fundraise that substantial amount.
Yeah. Friends, we have rapidly closed in on 9 o'clock. How time flies when we're having fun. Are there any last questions, burning things that you wanted to be able to express or say or ask, or this is your moment? Columbo would say just one more thing. Well, in which case, Claire, thank you so much for all the work that you've been involved in and are involved in with Operation Noah. Mike, thank you for leading the way with our finances and stuff. It's something we can be rightly proud of as a diocese to say, actually, this is stuff that we've helped shape and lead the way and partnered in. And to all of you, because you are all doing stuff in your local areas, in your churches, in your communities, thank you for what you do, because it does make a difference. I know sometimes we feel a little bit like we're on our own, or we're a voice in the wilderness crying, but we are preparing the way for the Lord, so that's okay.